The desert doesn't care that you're a widow. It doesn't care that your husband's body lies stiff in the bed you once shared, or that your hands are torn raw from trying to dig a grave in soil baked harder than iron. Sarah Mackenzie learned this truth as the Arizona sun scorched her back, each swing of the pickaxe sending lightning through her bleeding palms. 3 days. Thomas had been dead 3 days, and still she couldn't break enough ground to bury him properly. The fever had taken him quick, but death had left her slow, stretching before her like the endless mesa that imprisoned her failing homestead. She was 28 years old, and she was utterly, devastatingly alone. Before we dive into the story, if you're watching this right now, wherever you are in the world, I want you to know you're about to witness one of the most powerful stories of forbidden love and redemption ever to unfold in the American frontier. Click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more incredible stories tomorrow. And please, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love knowing that people from all corners of the earth are gathering here to share these moments. Now let's continue with the story. The fever had taken James Mackenzie in the night, leaving Sarah with a body too heavy for her to move and ground too hard for her to dig. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as she attacked the earth with a shovel that seemed to grow heavier with each strike. Her hands, once soft from life in Boston before James had dragged her to this godforsaken homestead, were now raw and bleeding. Blisters had formed and burst, painting the wooden handle red. She hadn't cried when she found him cold beside her that morning. She hadn't cried when she wrapped him in their only good blanket. But now, as the hole remained too shallow and the sun climbed higher, tears mixed with sweat and dust on her face. The sound came first, horses moving fast across the desert floor. Sarah's blood turned to ice water in her veins. Everyone knew what Apache raids meant for a woman alone. The Harrison family, 2 homesteads over, had been found last month. What remained of them, anyway? She dropped the shovel and ran for the cabin, her legs trembling from 3 days without proper food. The root cellar beneath the kitchen floor was her only chance. She pulled back the worn rug and lifted the heavy wooden door, dropping into darkness just as the thunder of hooves entered her yard. Through the gaps in the floorboards, she could see shadows moving. Moccasined feet stepped silently across her kitchen. They were searching, methodical and patient. A jar crashed to the floor above her, and she pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. Then the footsteps stopped directly overhead. She could see him through the slats, the largest man she had ever encountered, Apache or otherwise. He had to duck to move through her cabin, his broad shoulders blocking out the light. His hair was long and black as midnight, decorated with feathers and beads that caught the sun streaming through her window. The wooden door to the cellar creaked as he pulled it open. Their eyes met across the darkness, and Sarah waited for death. But death didn't come. Instead, the warrior studied her with eyes that held storms and sorrows she couldn't name. He took in her torn dress, her bloodied hands, the tear tracks through the dirt on her face. His gaze moved to the window, where James's partially buried form was visible in the yard. Something shifted in his expression, not pity exactly, but recognition. He had seen death before, had walked with it like an old companion. Without a word, he lowered the cellar door. She heard him speak in Apache to the others, his voice deep and commanding. The footsteps retreated. The horses rode away. Sarah remained frozen in the darkness for hours, afraid to believe she was still alive. When she finally emerged at sunset, she found a freshly killed rabbit on her doorstep, cleaned and ready for cooking. Beside it lay a handful of desert herbs she didn't recognize. In the yard, James's grave had been properly dug, deep and neat, with stones already gathered to mark it. The giant Apache was gone, but somehow Sarah knew with terrifying certainty that he would return. Sarah woke to find another offering at her door, a desert quail this time, its feathers still warm, and beside it a clay pot filled with water so clear it might have been drawn from heaven itself. 5 days had passed since the burial, and each morning brought new gifts she neither asked for nor wanted. Pride was all she had left, and even that was being stripped away by an Apache warrior whose name she didn't know and whose face haunted her sleepless nights. She tried refusing the food at first, leaving it untouched until the desert heat spoiled it. But hunger was a cruel master, and her body betrayed her resolve. The herbs he left had healed her torn hands faster than any medicine she knew. The meat kept her strength when her own supplies ran dangerously low. She hated him for making her need him. She hated herself more for the way her heart raced whenever she spotted his silhouette on the ridge above her property. He never came close during daylight, just watched from that high ground like some ancient guardian spirit. Sarah would work her dying garden, coaxing water from the well James had dug in better days, and feel those eyes on her. Sometimes she would look up and see him there, a statue carved from shadow and sunlight. Other times she saw nothing but felt his presence anyway, the way animals sense storms before they arrive. The morning everything changed started with dust clouds on the horizon. Not Apache this time. She had learned their way of moving left no trace. These were white men, careless and loud, their horses protesting the harsh pace. Sarah recognized the lead rider before he even reached her fence. Dale Morrison and his brothers, vultures who had been circling ever since James fell ill, eager to claim water rights from a widow who couldn't defend them. "Morning, Sarah," Dale said, not bothering to remove his hat. His brothers, Carl and Pete, flanked him with hands resting on their pistols. "Heard about James. Real shame. Woman like you shouldn't be out here alone." "I manage fine," Sarah said, keeping her voice steady though her knees shook. The rifle James had taught her to shoot was inside, useless as a prayer. "See, that's where you're wrong." Dale dismounted, his spurs catching the morning light. "Territory's dangerous. Apache been killing folks left and right. You need protection. Lucky for you, I'm willing to provide it. For a price. I'm not selling." Dale's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Didn't say nothing about selling. Marriage would solve both our problems. You get protection, I get the water rights. Everybody wins. I'd rather die." The slap came fast, knocking Sarah to the ground. Copper filled her mouth. Dale stood over her, his shadow swallowing her whole. "That can be arranged too." The arrow took Carl through the throat before anyone saw it coming. Pete barely had time to reach for his gun before a knife bloomed from his chest. Dale spun around, fumbling for his pistol, but the Apache warrior was already there, moving with impossible speed for someone so large. One massive hand closed around Dale's throat, lifting him off the ground like a child's doll. Sarah had never seen death delivered so efficiently, so silently. The warrior held Dale there, suspended, studying him the way a man might examine a particularly offensive insect. Dale's face turned purple, his legs kicking uselessly. Then, with a sound like breaking kindling, it was over. The warrior dropped the body and turned to Sarah. Blood ran from his shoulder where Pete had managed one wild shot. Without thinking, Sarah was on her feet, leading him inside. He sat on her kitchen floor, too large for her chairs, and let her clean the wound. His skin was warm under her fingers, scarred from battles she could only imagine. This close, she could see gray threading through his black hair, lines around his eyes that spoke of laughter and loss in equal measure. "Why?" she asked, pressing cloth against the wound. "Nate," he said, touching his chest. Then, in perfect though accented English, "You cannot survive alone here. The desert will swallow you before winter. I don't need your help." He caught her hand, his touch gentle despite the blood still wet on his fingers. "Your husband is dead. These men will not be the last. Your pride will not keep you warm when the snows come. It will not stop bullets or fill your stomach." Sarah pulled away, hating that he was right. "What do you want from me?" Nate stood, towering over her in the small space. "Nothing you do not wish to give. But I will watch. I will provide. This is my choice, not yours." He left before she could argue, disappearing into the desert like smoke. Sarah stood in her doorway, watching the horizon where he had vanished, 3 bodies cooling in her yard and her heart beating a rhythm she didn't recognize. For the first time since James died, she wasn't thinking about death. She was thinking about the way Nate had said her name, soft as a prayer, dangerous as a promise. The knife felt wrong in Sarah's hand, too heavy and too light at the same time. Nate stood behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his chest, his massive hand covering hers as he adjusted her grip. "Here," he said, his breath warm against her ear, guiding her hand to the soft spot beneath an imaginary ribcage. "Quick and deep. Do not hesitate. Hesitation is death." 3 weeks had passed since he'd killed the Morrison brothers, and the desert had swallowed their bodies without complaint. No one came looking. Perhaps no one cared. Or perhaps everyone knew better than to venture where an Apache warrior had claimed territory. Sarah had stopped fighting his presence after the first week, her pride crumbling under the weight of necessity. Winter was coming, and she knew nothing about surviving it alone. Again, Nate commanded, stepping back. Sarah lunged at the target he'd fashioned from old cloth and straw, imagining it was her fear she was killing. The blade sank deep, and for the first time, it felt right. Natural, like her body had been waiting to learn this dance of survival. "Better," he said, and she treasured that single word of praise more than she cared to admit. Their days fell into a rhythm. Mornings, he taught her to read the desert signs, which plants held water, which clouds meant storms, how to find direction by stars she'd never bothered to name. She learned that the desert wasn't empty, but full of life for those who knew where to look. Afternoons, while the sun made the world shimmer like a fever dream, she taught him to read from James's old books. His fingers, so deadly with weapons, traced letters with surprising delicacy. This word, Nate pointed to forgiveness in the Bible she'd opened. "What does it mean?" Sarah struggled to explain. "It means letting go of anger. When someone hurts you, but you choose not to hurt them back." He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes distant. "My people have no such word. We have words for balance, for justice. But this..." He shook his head. "White men killed my wife, my daughter, burned them while I was hunting. I came back to ashes and screams that had already ended. Tell me, Sarah Mackenzie, how does one forgive this?" The weight of his pain filled the room like smoke. Sarah reached out without thinking, her hand covering his. "You don't. Some things are unforgivable. But maybe you learn to live around the anger. Like a tree growing around a stone. Is this what you do? With your anger at your husband?" The question stunned her. "I wasn't angry at James. He brought you here to die slowly. Gave you no children. Left you alone." Nature's voice held no judgment, only observation. "I see the graves behind your cabin. 3 small ones. Babies who never breathed. Yet you speak his name with respect." Sarah pulled her hand away, wrapping her arms around herself. No one had ever spoken so plainly about her losses. He was a good man who made bad choices. The children, that wasn't his fault. Nor yours. 2 words, simple and clear, yet they broke something inside her. Tears came suddenly, violently, 3 years of grief pouring out while Nate sat perfectly still, his presence solid as the mountains. When she finally quieted, he spoke again. "My wife lost 2 before our daughter came. She blamed herself, said the spirits found her unworthy. I told her the spirits were fools if they could not see her strength." He paused, his voice softening. "The desert takes much, but sometimes it gives back." That evening, as they shared a meal of rabbit stew and flatbread he'd taught her to make, Sarah found herself studying his face in the firelight. The harsh lines had softened over the weeks. Or perhaps she was just learning to read them better. She saw the father in the way he carved the meat into perfect portions, the husband in how he insisted she eat first, the warrior only in the way he positioned himself between her and the door, always ready. "Your tribe," she ventured. "Why don't you go back? They wanted me to raid the fort, kill soldiers, their families, children." His jaw tightened. "I have seen enough dead children. They called me weak, said my heart had become white. Perhaps they were right. I cannot hate enough anymore. The young ones, they still burn with it. Let them. I am tired of burning." Sarah understood that exhaustion, the bone-deep weariness that came from carrying too much pain for too long. Without thinking, she reached across the small table and touched the scar that ran along his jaw. He went completely still, his eyes locked on hers. "We're both walking wounded," she whispered. "Yes, he agreed, catching her hand and pressing it against his cheek. But walking still. This is something. Outside, a coyote howled at the rising moon, and Sarah realized with startling clarity that she no longer felt alone. This giant warrior with gentle hands and terrible losses had somehow become necessary, like water, like air. The thought terrified her. The thought thrilled her. Tomorrow he would teach her to shoot James's rifle. Tomorrow she would teach him to write his name. Tonight, though, they sat in comfortable silence while the fire burned low, two broken souls learning that perhaps broken didn't mean beyond repair. The sandstorm hit like the fist of an angry god, turning day into night and air into grinding teeth. Sarah had seen storms before, but nothing like this monster that came howling across the desert, swallowing the world whole. Nature had appeared at her door moments before it struck, not asking permission to enter, but simply ducking inside and barring the door against the wind that wanted to tear everything apart. For 3 days they would be trapped together in her small cabin, the storm raging outside like all the demons of hell had been set loose. 3 days that would change everything between them, though neither knew it, yet as they stood awkwardly in her kitchen, the walls shaking with nature's fury. "The horses?" Sarah asked, having to shout over the wind. "In the lean-to. They will survive." Nate moved through her space carefully, checking windows, stuffing cloth into gaps where sand tried to force its way inside. His presence filled the cabin, making it feel smaller and somehow safer at the same time. "This storm will last. I have seen its kind before." By nightfall, they had settled into an uneasy domesticity. Sarah cooked while Nate maintained the fire, keeping it low to preserve wood. The sand had blocked out all light from outside, creating a twilight world where time lost meaning. They ate in relative quiet, the storm's voice speaking for them both. "Tell me of your daughter," Sarah said suddenly, surprising herself with the question. Nature's hands stilled on the piece of leather he'd been working. "Why?" "Because I want to know. Because we might die in this storm, and someone should remember her besides you." He was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, quietly, his voice barely audible above the wind, he began. "Her name was Iona. It means eternal blossom. She had her mother's smile and my stubbornness. 5 winters old when—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "She feared storms like this, would climb into our bed, small as a rabbit, and demand stories until she fell asleep." "What kind of stories?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Tales of Coyote the trickster. How the stars were born. Why the eagle flies highest." She would ask 1,000 questions, never satisfied with simple answers. His voice cracked slightly. "I would give anything to answer her questions again." Sarah reached across the space between them, taking his hand. "Tell me one. Tell me a story you would have told her." And he did. As the storm raged, Nature's voice wove tales of animals and spirits, of clever maidens who outwitted warriors and brave children who saved their tribes. Sarah found herself leaning closer, drawn not just by the stories, but by the way his face transformed in the telling, years falling away until she could almost see the father he had been. On the second night, Sarah woke to find herself burning with fever. The infected cuts on her arms from gathering cactus fruit had turned angry red, spreading poison through her blood. She tried to hide it, but Nate knew immediately, his hand cool against her burning forehead. "Foolish woman," he muttered, but his touch was infinitely gentle as he examined the wounds. "Why did you say nothing?" "Didn't want to be trouble," she mumbled, already half delirious. He worked through the night, crushing herbs into paste, forcing bitter tea between her lips, singing low songs in Apache that sounded like prayers. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness, lost in fever dreams where her dead babies called to her from the storm. She reached for them, crying out their names that had never been spoken aloud, begging them to wait for her. "No." Nature's voice cut through the delirium, his arms holding her when she tried to rise. "You do not go to them. Not yet. Stay. Stay with me." She clung to his voice like a rope in the darkness, letting it pull her back when the fever tried to take her under. Sometime in the endless night, she felt him crying, felt tears that were not her own dropping onto her face as he held her against his chest, rocking slightly. "Do not leave," he whispered in Apache, then English, then Apache again. "I cannot watch another woman die. Please. The desert has taken enough. Let it not take you." When the fever finally broke near dawn of the third day, Sarah found herself wrapped in Nature's arms, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her ear. He was awake, had probably been awake all night, his hand stroking her hair with infinite care. "You stayed," she whispered. "You stayed." He countered, and she heard years of relief in those two words. The storm was dying outside, its rage spent, leaving an eerie quiet in its wake. Light began to filter through the cracks, painting lines across the floor. But neither of them moved, held in place by something more powerful than any storm. "Nate," Sarah said softly, testing his name, tasting it. "What are we doing?" "Living," he answered simply. "Despite everything that says we should not." She turned in his arms to look up at him, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Not as Apache or warrior or threat, but as a man who had suffered and survived and chosen to protect rather than destroy. Without thinking, without planning, she reached up and touched his face, tracing the lines that pain had carved there. "Your fever," he said roughly, catching her hand. "You are not yourself." "I've never been more myself," Sarah answered, and knew it was true. The storm had stripped away everything but truth, leaving them bare before each other, two souls who had found each other in the vast emptiness of loss. Outside, the world began to remake itself from sand and silence. Inside, something new was being born between them, fragile as the desert flowers that would bloom after the storm, and just as unlikely, and just as beautiful. The men from town came at dawn, 12 of them with rifles and righteousness, their faces twisted with the particular hatred reserved for those who crossed invisible lines. Sarah heard them before she saw them, their horses raising dust clouds that painted the sunrise brown. She knew why they'd come. Someone had seen Nate leaving her cabin after the storm, had carried tales back to town like disease spreading through a body. "Sarah Mackenzie." Mayor Collins's voice boomed across the desert quiet. "Come out here and answer for yourself." She emerged with James's rifle in her hands, knowing it was useless against so many but needing its weight anyway. The men formed a semicircle around her porch, their weapons not quite aimed but ready. She recognized most of them: the baker who used to give her day-old bread, the blacksmith who'd fixed her wagon wheel, neighbors who'd tipped their hats and called her ma'am before she'd committed the unforgivable sin of accepting help from an Apache. "Gentlemen," she said, proud that her voice didn't shake. "To what do I owe this social call? Don't play dumb, woman." Collins spat tobacco juice into her garden. "We know you've been harboring that savage. Folks saw him here. You're consorting with the enemy of all decent Christian people." "I'm surviving," Sarah said simply. "Something none of you helped me do after James died." "Your husband would roll in his grave knowing you've taken up with his killer's kind," Tom Watson added, his young face flushed with excitement at being part of the mob. "The Apache didn't kill James. Fever did. And that man saved me from the Morrison brothers when they came to take what wasn't theirs." "Where were all of you then?" "The Morrisons were white men. Whatever quarrel they had with you could have been handled proper," Collins said. "But lying with savages? That's something else entirely. That's choosing sides against your own kind." "I haven't lain with anyone," Sarah lied, though the memory of Nature's hands during her fever made her skin burn. "Don't matter what you've done or haven't," another man called out. "You're coming with us. For your own protection. And if that Apache shows his face, we'll put him down like the animal he is." Sarah raised the rifle. "I'm not going anywhere." Several men laughed. Collins didn't. "You gonna shoot all of us, little lady? You got 12 bullets in that thing." "No," Sarah admitted. "But I've got one for you, Mayor. And I'm a good shot. Whoever comes for me first loses their leader." "Worth it." The standoff stretched taut as barbed wire. Sarah's arms ached from holding the rifle steady, but she didn't lower it. She could feel Nate watching from somewhere, knew he was fighting every instinct to remain hidden. If he showed himself, they'd kill him without hesitation. "This ain't over," Collins finally said. "You got till sundown to pack up and leave. After that, we burn you out." And if we catch that savage anywhere near you, we'll hang him slow and make you watch." They rode away in a cloud of dust and threats, leaving Sarah shaking on her porch. She didn't lower the rifle until they were completely out of sight, and even then, her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Nate materialized from the desert like he'd been born from it, his face a mask of controlled fury. "You should have let me kill them. Then they'd send more. And more after that. There's no winning this. There is always winning. Sometimes it just looks like leaving." He stood before her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "You must go. Tonight. I know places where they will not follow. I can't. This is my home. James is buried here. My children. Your children are dead," Nate said harshly. "Your husband is dead. You stay here. You join them. Is that what you want?" The brutal truth of it hit her like a physical blow. "And what about you? You'll just disappear back into the desert." "Yes. No." The word came out fierce and desperate. "No, you don't get to save me and then vanish. You don't get to make me care whether you live or die and then leave me wondering which it is." "Sarah, I've been dead inside for years," she interrupted, stepping closer until there was no space between them. "Going through motions, pretending to live while waiting to die. Then you came, and for the first time since I lost my last baby, I felt something. You made me feel alive again, Nate. Don't take that away. Don't leave me alone in the dark again." His control finally cracked. He pulled her against him, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that was desperate and hungry and full of goodbye. Sarah kissed him back with everything she had, pouring years of loneliness and loss into this moment. This man who'd shown her she could still feel. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nate's eyes were wet. "You do not know what you ask. I'm asking you to stay. To fight for this, for us, instead of disappearing." He cupped her face in his massive hands, thumbs tracing her cheekbones with heartbreaking tenderness. "They will never accept us. Your people are mine." "Then we make our own people," Sarah whispered. "We go where no one knows us. Start over. Together." Nate was quiet for a long moment, his internal war playing out across his features. Then something settled in his expression, a decision made. He pulled her inside the cabin, his movements suddenly urgent. Their coupling was fierce and tender by turns, a claiming and a promise, a goodbye to everything they'd been before and a greeting to what they might become. Afterward, as they lay entwined on her narrow bed, skin cooling in the afternoon heat, Nate placed his hand on her belly. "By winter, you'll have my son growing inside you," he vowed, his voice carrying the weight of prophecy. "I will not let you face this world alone again. We leave tonight for Mexico. There are places there where no one asks questions, where a man and woman can simply be." Sarah covered his hand with hers, feeling the truth of his words settle into her bones. Already she could feel something changing, some spark of life taking hold where before there had been only emptiness. "Together? Together," he confirmed, sealing the promise with another kiss. "Always together." The first snow came early that year, soft flakes drifting down like prayers made visible, and Sarah knew with bone-deep certainty that nature's promise had taken root. She stood in the doorway of their hidden cabin, one hand pressed to her belly where life grew with determined strength, watching him work in the distance. 3 months had passed since they'd fled into the mountains between Arizona and Mexico, finding sanctuary in a valley so remote that even the wind seemed to have forgotten it existed. The sickness came in waves, but different from before. With James's babies, she'd been violently ill, unable to keep food down, growing weaker by the day until her body surrendered its hold on life. This time, the nausea was gentle, almost tender, as if this child was being careful with her. She could feel the difference in her bones, in the way her body welcomed this pregnancy instead of fighting it. Nate had noticed before she'd said anything, his eyes tracking the subtle changes in her body with an intensity that made her flush. He'd started hunting more, bringing back deer instead of rabbits, insisting she eat the organ meat for strength. At night, he would lie with his ear pressed to her still flat stomach, speaking in Apache to the child within. "What are you telling him?" Sarah asked one evening, running her fingers through his long hair. teaching him the names of stars, the songs of our people, the sound of his father's voice so he will know he was wanted. He looked up at her, vulnerability naked in his eyes. I did not get to do this with Ayana. Her mother thought it foolish, talking to a belly. But I believe they hear. I believe they know. Sarah pulled him up to kiss him, tasting winter on his lips. Tell him in English, too. He needs to know both worlds. She, Nate corrected with rare playfulness. This one is a girl. I can tell by how she sits, high and proud. How many pregnancies have you witnessed to be such an expert? Enough. His hand splayed across her belly, covering it completely. This one is strong. Like her mother. She will not leave you. The words were meant to comfort, but they carried weight. Sarah had lost 3 babies, all boys according to the midwife who'd attended her. Each loss had carved pieces from her soul until she believed herself hollow, unable to create anything but grief. But this child felt different from the first flutter of life. This child felt like destiny. Their days fell into a rhythm of preparation. Nate built hidden caches of supplies throughout the valley, planning for every contingency. He taught Sarah which plants could ease birth pains, which ones would help her milk come in strong. She sewed tiny clothes from the fabric of her old dresses, each stitch a prayer for the future. The town they'd fled seemed like another lifetime, though Sarah knew the danger hadn't passed. Twice, Nate had spotted riders in the distance, searching parties that came close but never found their hidden valley. He would disappear for days after these sightings, ensuring their tracks were covered, their presence erased. Sarah hated these absences, the fear that ate at her until he returned, but she understood the necessity. We cannot stay here forever, she said one night as they lay together, her back pressed against his chest, his hand protective over her growing belly. After the baby comes, when you are both strong enough to travel, we go deeper into Mexico. I know people there, mixed families like we will be. Places where no one cares about Apache or white, only about surviving. Will they accept us? They will accept gold. And I have gold, taken from soldiers who no longer need it. His voice carried no remorse, only practicality. Enough to buy land, cattle, to build something real. Sarah turned in his arms to face him. You've been planning this. Since the day I first saw you in that cellar, covered in dirt and tears, but still fighting to live. I knew then you were different. Knew you were worth saving. You didn't save me, Sarah corrected. We saved each other. The baby moved for the first time that night, a flutter like butterfly wings that made Sarah gasp. Nate went completely still, his hand pressed against the spot, waiting. When the movement came again, stronger this time, his face transformed with wonder. She greets us, he whispered in awe. He's saying hello to his father, Sarah countered, laughing through tears she hadn't expected. They stayed awake until dawn, hands joined over her belly, feeling their child announce its presence in the world. With each movement, Sarah felt her fear dissolving, replaced by a fierce protectiveness she'd never experienced before. This child would live. She knew it with the same certainty that she knew the sun would rise, that snow would melt into spring, that Nate would die before letting harm come to them. I need to tell you something, Nate said as the first light painted the mountains gold. My former brothers, they know I live. Goyakla sent word through the trading posts. They consider me a traitor, say I've brought shame to our people by choosing a white woman over vengeance. Sarah's blood chilled. Will they come? Perhaps. But I am not the warrior I was. I am better. I have something to protect now, something to fight for besides anger. He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. Let them come. They will find a man who has learned what it means to love more than he hates. That makes me more dangerous than I ever was before. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing their valley in white silence. Inside, their child danced beneath Sarah's heart, proof that life could grow even in the harshest ground, that love could bloom in the most unlikely soil. Sarah pressed closer to Nate, feeling his heartbeat against her chest, their child safe between them. Whatever came next, they would face it together. A family forged not from shared blood or common culture, but from choice, from courage, from the radical act of choosing love in a world that demanded hate. They came like ghosts out of the morning mist, 5 Apache warriors moving with the silence of death itself. Sarah saw them first from the window where she'd been watching the sunrise paint the valley gold. Her 7-month belly made movement difficult, but terror gave her speed. She reached for the rifle, but Nature's hand stopped her. "No," he said quietly, his face grave as stone. "That is Goyakla, my war chief, my brother in all but blood. If they wanted us dead, we would not have seen them coming." The warriors approached slowly, giving Nate time to prepare. He stripped to the waist despite the cold, revealing the scars that marked him as a warrior of distinction. Sarah had traced those scars with her fingers countless times, but seeing them now, displayed like credentials of violence, made her realize how much of himself Nate had set aside to be with her. Goyakla dismounted first, his face painted for war, eyes hard as flint. The others flanked him, young men Sarah didn't recognize, their faces twisted with barely contained rage. They looked at her with such hatred that her hand instinctively went to her belly, protecting the child within. "You live like a white man now," Goyakla said in Apache, though Sarah had learned enough to understand. "In a wooden cage, with a pale woman warming your bed. I live as a man who has chosen peace." Nate responded in their language. "This is my wife. She carries my child." One of the younger warriors spat. "She carries an abomination. Mixed blood is weak blood." Nature's hand went to his knife, but Goyakla raised a hand. "We did not come to trade insults about your woman, though the spirits weep at what you've become." He switched to English, his accent thick but words clear, addressing Sarah directly. "You have stolen our strongest warrior with your white woman's magic." "I've stolen nothing," Sarah said, finding her voice. "He chose to stay, just as he chose not to murder children at the fort. Those children grow to be soldiers. Soldiers who kill Apache babies." Goyakla's eyes burned into hers. "But this is discussion for another day. We come because the army moves against us. They have new leader, Colonel Harrison. He promises to end the Apache wars by winter's end. We need every warrior." "I'm done with war," Nate said firmly. "You are never done with war when you are Apache." The youngest warrior, barely more than a boy, stepped forward. "My father died following you into battle. My mother starved because you were not there to hunt for the tribe when the soldiers burned our food stores." "And for what? So you could rut with the enemy?" "Watch your tongue, Kitsai," Nate warned, his voice dropping to dangerous levels. "Or what? You'll kill me like you killed Dakia and Bimanak." Kitsai's hand went to his weapon. "Oh yes, we know. You murdered your brothers for this white whore." Everything happened in heartbeats. Kitsai drew his knife. Nate moved faster than Sarah's eyes could follow, disarming the young warrior and throwing him to the ground. But Kitsai was young and fast, rolling away and pulling a hidden blade. He lunged not at Nate, but at Sarah, hatred making him reckless. Nate's knife took him in the throat before he got 3 steps. Kitsai dropped, blood pooling in the snow, his eyes wide with surprise. The other warriors drew weapons, and Sarah knew with sick certainty that they would all die here in this valley she'd thought safe. "Stop!" Goyakla's command cracked like thunder. He looked at Kitsai's body, then at Nate, something like grief crossing his weathered face. "You would kill your own people for her." "I would kill anyone who threatens my family," Nate said simply. "Apache, white Mexican. The color of their skin means nothing if they come for what is mine." Another warrior, older than Kitsai but still young, stepped forward. "Then you are no longer Apache. You are nothing." "I am a father," Nate corrected. "I am a husband. I am a protector. These things matter more than blood or tribe or war." Goyakla studied him for a long moment. "The army comes, Nate. Not just for us, but for all Apache. They will find you here eventually. Your white-skinned woman will not protect you. They will see only Apache when they look at you, and they will kill you just the same. Then we will go deeper into Mexico. Mexico has made agreement with the Americans. No sanctuary there for Apache anymore." Goyakla's voice carried the weight of endings. "The world shrinks, brother. Soon there will be nowhere left to run." "There is always somewhere," Sarah interjected, stepping forward despite Nate's attempt to stop her. There are places where people mind their own business, where families can disappear. We have gold. We can buy new names, new lives. Goyakla looked at her with something that might have been respect. You have courage, white woman. Stupid courage, but courage nonetheless. He turned back to Nate. You are dead to us now. Your name will not be spoken. Your victories will be forgotten. You choose her over hundreds of years of Apache blood. I choose tomorrow over yesterday, Nate replied. I choose life over death. I choose love over hate. Love? Goyakla said the word like it tasted bitter. Love did not save your first wife. Love did not save your daughter. Love will not save you when the soldiers come. Maybe not, Nate agreed. But hate didn't save them either. At least with love, whatever time we have is worth having. Goyakla mounted his horse, the other warriors following. Before riding away, he looked back one last time. The army has scouts watching the water sources. They know about this valley. You have maybe 10 days before they come. After that, you are on your own. I've been on my own since the day they burned my family, Nate said quietly. No, Goyakla corrected, his eyes moving to Sarah's swollen belly. Now you have something to lose again. The spirits have cruel sense of humor, giving you hope just to watch it crushed. Goodbye, man who was once my brother. May your deaths be quick. They rode away, taking Kit-Sai's body, leaving only blood in the snow and the promise of violence to come. Sarah collapsed against Nate, her whole body shaking. He held her tight, one hand on her belly where their child kicked frantically, sensing its mother's fear. 10 days, she whispered. 10 days, he confirmed. Time enough to disappear. To become new people with new names and new stories. Will it work? Nate kissed her forehead, her tears, her lips. It will work because it must. Because I have promises to keep. Because our child will not be born into war. They began packing that very hour, knowing that the past had finally caught up with them, that the future demanded they leave everything behind. Sarah looked around the cabin that had been their sanctuary, the place where their child had been conceived, where they'd built a brief paradise in a world that wanted them dead. Soon it would be just another abandoned shelter in the mountains. But what had happened here? The love that had grown against all odds, that would travel with them wherever they ran. The blizzard struck without mercy, trapping them in an abandoned mining shack 3 days into their flight from the valley. Sarah's water broke just as the wind reached its howling peak, as if the child had chosen the worst possible moment to demand entry into the world. They were alone, 50 miles from the nearest town, with nothing but Nate's knowledge and Sarah's determination standing between life and death. Too early, Sarah gasped, gripping Nate's hand as another contraction ripped through her. 2 weeks too early. This child chooses its own time, Nate said, his voice steady though Sarah could see fear in his eyes. Like its parents, it does not wait for permission. He had prepared as best he could, boiling water on the small stove, laying out the clean cloth they'd packed, the knife to cut the cord sterilized in flame. But Sarah could see the tremor in his hands as he helped her onto the makeshift bed of blankets. He had delivered horses and cattle, had seen his first wife birth their daughter, but he had never done this alone, never with so much depending on his hands. I'm scared, Sarah admitted as another wave of pain crashed over her. Fear is good. Fear means you fight. You are strongest woman I know. You will bring this child into world, and I will help you. He positioned himself between her legs, his face set with determination. Now push when your body tells you. Listen to nothing else but what your body says. The hours blurred into a symphony of pain and effort. The blizzard raged outside, wind screaming through gaps in the walls, snow piling against the door until they were truly cut off from the world. Sarah pushed until she thought she would split apart, Nature's voice the only anchor in the storm of sensation. I can see the head, he said, wonder breaking through his careful control. Dark hair like mine. Push again, my strong one. Push our child into the world. But something was wrong. Sarah could feel it in the way the baby wouldn't come despite her efforts, in the warmth spreading beneath her that she knew was too much blood. The familiar weakness was creeping in, the same feeling that had preceded her other losses. Nate, she gasped. I'm bleeding. His face went pale, but his hands remained steady. Look at me. Look only at me. You will not leave. You will not die. I forbid it. You can't forbid death. Watch me. He did something with his hands, adjusting the baby's position, and suddenly the pressure changed. Now, push now with everything you have. Our child needs you to be strong one more time. Sarah gathered every fragment of strength left in her body and pushed. The pain was transcendent, beyond anything she'd experienced, but then suddenly it was over. A baby's cry cut through the blizzard's howl, high and strong and alive. Through her fading vision, Sarah saw Nate lift their child, his face transformed with awe. A son, he whispered. You gave me a son. But Sarah was floating away, the blood loss pulling her toward darkness. She heard Nate's voice turn sharp with panic, felt his hands pressing against her, trying to stop the hemorrhaging. He was speaking rapidly in Apache, then English, prayers and pleas mixed with medical knowledge he'd gathered from both worlds. Stay with me, he commanded, his voice breaking. You look at your son. You look at what we made. He placed the baby on her chest, and Sarah forced her eyes to focus. The child was perfect, with Nate's strong features softened by her own traits, skin a beautiful bronze that belonged to neither world and both at once. His eyes, when they opened, were dark and alert, seeming to see straight through to her soul. He's beautiful, she whispered. He needs his mother. I need his mother. Nate was packing the bleeding with cloth, using pressure points he'd learned in war to slow the flow. You promised to go to Mexico with me. You promised to give him brothers and sisters. You keep your promises, Sarah Mackenzie. The baby rooted against her breast, finding his way by instinct, and when he latched on, something powerful flooded through Sarah's body. Not quite strength, but will. The determination that had carried her through everything else surged back, demanded she survive this too. That's it, Nate encouraged, seeing the change in her face. Fight. Fight for him. Fight for us. For hours they existed in that space between life and death, the storm raging outside, while inside a quieter battle was fought. Nate never stopped working, using every piece of knowledge from both his cultures. He made her drink bitter tea brewed from herbs that slowed bleeding. He massaged her belly to help expel the afterbirth. He kept her warm when shock tried to claim her, kept her conscious when darkness beckoned. By dawn, the bleeding had stopped. The storm had passed, leaving the world buried in pristine white. Sarah was weak but alive, their son nursing contentedly at her breast. Nate sat beside them, exhausted, covered in blood, looking like he'd aged years in a single night. You saved us, Sarah said softly. You saved yourself. I just helped. He touched their son's head with infinite gentleness. He came early because he knew the storm would hide us. The army will not search in this weather. By the time they do, our trail will be cold. What do we call him? Nate considered. Samuel Takota Mackenzie. Your father's name, and the Apache word for friend to everyone. He will need to be both to survive in this world. Sarah looked at their son, this impossible child who shouldn't exist but did, born in a blizzard between two worlds, delivered by hands that had taken life and now protected it. He's perfect. He is hope, Nate corrected. First of many. You will heal, grow strong again. We will reach Mexico. We will build something new. He kissed her forehead, then their son's. The worst is behind us now. But even as he said it, they both heard horses in the distance, muffled by snow but growing closer. The army or travelers seeking shelter. There was no way to know. Nate reached for his rifle, ready to defend his family once again. Sarah held their son closer, feeling fierce love fill every space that fear tried to claim. Whatever comes, she said, we face it together. Together, Nate agreed, positioning himself between his family and the door. The horses grew closer, and their new life hung in the balance, fragile as their newborn son's breath, strong as the love that had created him. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, painting the snow-covered world in shades of gold and shadow, beautiful and dangerous in equal measure, just like the life they'd chosen, just like the love they'd found in the most impossible of places. Captain Morrison looked older than his 40 years, his face weathered by desert sun and the weight of orders he didn't want to follow. His small detachment of 6 soldiers sat on their horses in a semicircle around the mining shack, rifles not quite raised but ready. Sarah emerged first, their 3-day-old son wrapped against her chest, her face pale but determined. Nate followed, every muscle coiled for violence, his hand resting on the knife at his belt. "Mrs. Mackenzie," Morrison said, touching his hat brim. His eyes widened at the sight of the baby. "We heard you were, that you'd taken up with." He stopped, clearly struggling with how to proceed. "With her husband," Sarah said firmly, her voice carrying despite her weakness. "This is my husband, Nate, and our son, Samuel." The soldiers shifted uncomfortably. The youngest, barely 18, stared at the baby with something like wonder. Another, older and harder, spat tobacco juice into the snow with obvious disgust. "Ma'am, you know that's not legal." "Can't be legal. Mixed marriages are forbidden in the territory, and even if they weren't, he's Apache. There's standing orders to arrest any Apache found off the reservation." Morrison's voice carried genuine regret. "I need to take him in, and you need to come back to town for your own protection." "Protection from what?" "From who?" Sarah stepped forward, swaying slightly but holding her ground. "From the man who saved my life, who delivered our son 3 days ago in that blizzard while I nearly bled to death. Or protection from men like Dale Morrison and his brothers who tried to force themselves on me." "Dale Morrison was my cousin," the captain said quietly. "I know what kind of man he was, but that doesn't change my orders." "Your orders are to arrest Apache warriors," Sarah continued. "This man is a farmer, a father. He's harmed no one who didn't attack us first. He killed 2 of his own kind 3 months back. We found the bodies." "Defending me," Sarah said. "They came to hurt me and our unborn child. Would you have had him stand by and watch?" The captain dismounted slowly, his hand away from his weapon, trying to defuse the mounting tension. "Mrs. Mackenzie, please be reasonable. You have to know how this looks. A white woman with an Apache, a baby between them. It's unnatural. It goes against everything." "Everything you've been taught," Sarah interrupted. "But not everything that's true. Captain Morrison, look at my son. Really look at him." She pulled back the blanket, revealing Samuel's face. The baby was awake, his dark eyes alert and curious, one tiny fist waving in the cold air. He was beautiful in the way all babies are beautiful, innocent and perfect, and utterly unaware of the hatred his very existence inspired. "He's 3 days old," Sarah continued. "He knows nothing of Apache or white, of war or hatred. He only knows his parents' love. Are you going to make him an orphan? Are you going to be the one to tell him when he's older that you arrested his father for the crime of loving his mother?" The youngest soldier dismounted without permission, moving closer. "Captain, maybe we could." "Get back on your horse, Private Collins," Morrison snapped. But the damage was done. The moment of potential violence had passed, replaced by something more complex. "I've got orders," Morrison said again, but with less conviction. "From who?" A new voice called out. 3 wagons approached through the snow, and Sarah recognized the Hendersons, the Millers, and impossibly, Martha Coleman, the minister's wife from town. They were family Sarah had helped during the drought, sharing what little she had when their own wells ran dry. "This doesn't concern you civilians," Morrison said. "It does when you're threatening our neighbor," Tom Henderson said, climbing down from his wagon with his rifle. "Sarah Mackenzie saved my daughter's life when she had the fever. Gave us her last medicine. Now you want to destroy her family. She's taken up with an Apache," the hard-faced soldier growled. "It ain't natural or Christian." Martha Coleman, 60 years old and formidable, walked directly up to that soldier's horse. "Don't you dare speak of Christian behavior, Samuel Briggs. I know exactly what you did to that Mexican girl in Tucson. At least Mrs. Mackenzie had the courage to marry the man she loves." "You performed a marriage?" Morrison asked, incredulous. "My husband did, yesterday when we found them," Martha lied smoothly. "Before God and witnesses. Legal as any marriage needs to be in the territories." More people were arriving, drawn by some invisible signal. The Changs from the laundry, the Kowalskis who ran the general store, Even old Miguel, who everyone pretended wasn't part Apache himself. They formed a protective wall around the small family, weapons evident, but not overtly threatening. "You're asking me to go against direct orders," Morrison said to the growing crowd. "We're asking you to be human," Sarah said quietly. "To see us as people, not as symbols of something you've been told to hate." Nate spoke for the first time, his English careful and clear. "Captain, I fought in many battles, killed many soldiers. This is truth. But that war is over for me. I want only to raise my son in peace, to love my wife, to farm land and live quietly. Is this so terrible?" Morrison looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. "You're the one they call Ghost Warrior. You led the raid at Sulphur Springs." "Yes, and your people led raid at Camp Grant. Killed women and children while warriors were away hunting. We can list crimes until the sun sets and rises and sets again. Or we can choose to end it here." The captain was quiet for a long moment, internal struggle clear on his face. Finally, he pulled out his report book and made some notations. "According to my official report, we found the bodies of an Apache warrior and a white woman killed by bandits. Tragic loss. No survivors found despite extensive searching." "Captain," the young private said, confused. "You heard me, Collins. No survivors. Search completed. Time to move on to the next sector." Morrison mounted his horse, then looked back at Sarah and Nate. "Mexico's a long way. Dangerous journey for a family with a newborn. Shame if they were to get lost and never be seen again." Sarah sagged with relief, and Nate caught her, supporting her weight. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me. I'm doing my job. Searching for hostiles. Haven't found any here, just good people trying to survive." He touched his hat again. "Ma'am." "Sir. Congratulations on your son." As the soldiers rode away, the young private looked back one more time, raising his hand in what might have been a wave or a blessing. The crowd remained until the soldiers were completely out of sight. Then Tom Henderson spoke. "We've got supplies loaded. Food, medicine, ammunition. Everything you'll need for the journey south. Consider it a baby gift." "And this," Martha Coleman pressed a leather pouch into Sarah's hands. "Collection from the church." "Well, from some of the church. Enough to start fresh wherever you land." Sarah started crying, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. These people who had every reason to turn away were instead risking themselves to help. Nate bowed deeply, a gesture of respect from a proud man who rarely bent to anyone. "We won't forget this," he said. "Just live well," Martha replied. "Live well and be happy. That's all the thanks we need." As they prepared to leave, Sarah looked back at the shack where their son had been born, where they'd nearly lost everything, where instead they discovered that even in a world poisoned by hate, love could still inspire courage. Samuel slept peacefully against her chest, unaware of how close he'd come to losing his father, of the small miracle that had just occurred. "Ready?" Nate asked, helping her into the wagon the Hendersons had provided. "Ready," Sarah confirmed, looking ahead to the southern horizon where Mexico waited with the promise of new beginnings. The Mexican sun painted their small farm golden in the early morning light, so different from the harsh Arizona desert Sarah had once known. 6 months had passed since Captain Morrison had let them disappear into the wilderness. 6 months of traveling and hiding and finally, blessedly, arriving at this valley where no one cared about their mixed marriage or the color of their son's skin. Samuel, now 9 months old, crawled determinedly across the wooden floor Nate had laid with his own hands, chasing a cloth ball while his parents watched from the doorway. "He'll be walking soon," Nate observed, pride evident in his voice. "Look how he pulls himself up on the chairs. Stubborn like his mother. Strong like his father," Sarah countered, her hand resting on her belly where new life grew. The second pregnancy had come as naturally as breathing, her body finally understanding how to hold on to hope. She hadn't told Nate yet, wanting to wait until she was certain, but she knew. A woman always knew. Their farm was modest but thriving. The gold Nate had taken from dead soldiers had bought them 20 acres of good land and enough cattle to start a small herd. Their neighbors, a mix of Mexican farmers, former slaves seeking freedom, and other couples who didn't fit anywhere else, had welcomed them without question. Here, they were simply the Mackenzies, Samuel and Sarah, farmers who worked hard and minded their own business. Sarah, Nate, a voice called from the road. Maria Gonzalez approached on her donkey, her own mixed-race children running alongside. She'd married a Chinese railroad worker who'd stayed after the tracks were laid, and her family had become their closest friends. Letter came to the town post. From America. Sarah's blood chilled. They'd told no one where they were going. Nate took the letter carefully, as if it might bite. The return address was from Martha Coleman, the minister's wife. Inside, in careful handwriting, was news from the world they'd left behind. My dear Sarah and family, she had written. I hope this letter finds you well wherever you've settled. I wanted you to know that Captain Morrison kept his word. You are officially listed as deceased, killed by bandits. Your husband is recorded as having died in the same attack. There will be no one looking for you. The town has moved on, though some of us remember you fondly. The Hendersons asked me to tell you their daughter is married now, to a good man who doesn't care that she's part Comanche. Times are changing, slowly but surely. Perhaps one day you can visit, though I understand if that day never comes. Give our love to your son. May God bless your family always. Martha. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. It's over. It's really over. No, Nate corrected gently. It's beginning. Maria's children were playing with Samuel now, teaching him words in Spanish and Chinese and English, a mixing of languages that would have horrified the people in Sarah's former world, but here seemed natural as breathing. This was the future, Sarah realized. Not the rigid boundaries of race and culture, but this beautiful blending, these children who would grow up seeing difference as interesting rather than threatening. Papa, Papa. Samuel's first word rang out clear and strong. He'd pulled himself to standing and was taking his first wobbling steps toward Nate, who dropped to his knees, arms open. That's it, my son. Come to Papa. Samuel made it 3 steps before falling, but he was laughing, and soon they were all laughing, Maria and her children too, joy infectious as sunshine. Nate scooped Samuel up, tossing him gently in the air while the baby shrieked with delight. I have something to tell you, Sarah said once Maria had left and Samuel was napping. She took Nate's hand and placed it on her belly. Your promise is coming true again. His eyes widened with understanding, then filled with the same wonder she'd seen when Samuel was born. Another child? Another child. Due in winter, I think. He pulled her close, his embrace encompassing her whole world. You are my miracle, Sarah Mackenzie. You and our children. We're each other's miracles, she corrected. That evening, as they sat on their handmade porch watching the sun set over their fields, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that dark root cellar where she'd hidden from Apache raiders to this moment, sitting beside the Apache warrior who'd become her salvation, their son playing at their feet, and another child growing within her, it seemed impossible. Yet here they were. Do you miss it? She asked. Your old life? Your people? Nate considered for a long moment. I miss parts. The songs. The stories. The feeling of belonging to something ancient. But I would not trade this for anything. Here, I am not Apache or warrior or ghost of the past. I am husband, father, farmer. I am man who loves his wife and children. This is enough. More than enough. The children should know their heritage. Both sides of it. They will. I will teach them Apache ways, the language, the stories. You will teach them to read and write, to understand the white world. But most importantly, we will teach them to be good people, to judge others by their actions, not their blood. Samuel woke from his nap and crawled onto his father's lap, babbling happily in the mixed language he was creating for himself. Sarah leaned against Nate's shoulder, feeling complete in a way she'd never imagined possible during those long, barren years with James. I never thanked you, she said suddenly, for seeing me in that cellar and choosing not to harm me, for coming back, for saving me. You saved yourself. I just recognized a warrior when I saw one. He kissed the top of her head. Even covered in dirt and tears, you were fighting. Still fighting. Will always fight. This is why I love you. I love you too. Both of you. All of you. She amended, hand on her belly. As darkness fell, They went inside their simple home, Nate carrying Samuel while Sarah lit the lamps. Through the window, she could see other lights coming on in distant farmhouses, other families settling in for the evening, other stories of survival and hope playing out across this vast land that asked no questions about the past. They were far from everything they'd known, these two broken souls who'd found each other in the aftermath of loss. They'd crossed every line their world had drawn, defied every expectation, survived every threat. And here, in this quiet valley in Mexico, they were writing a new story. Not Apache or white, not conquered or conqueror, but simply human, simply family, simply home. Sarah remembered Nature's promise, spoken with such certainty in her cabin that day the townsmen had come to drive them apart. By winter, you'll have my son growing inside you. He'd been right, but also wrong. It wasn't just his son or her son, but their son, their children, their future taking root in defiance of a world that said they couldn't exist. What are you thinking? Nate asked, seeing her distant expression. That love wins, Sarah said simply. Despite everything, love wins. Outside, coyotes called to each other across the valley, their voices blending with the laughter from Maria's farm and the lowing of cattle and the whisper of wind through corn stalks. It was the sound of life continuing, adapting, thriving. It was the sound of hope. It was the sound of home. And in that simple farmhouse, as Sarah nursed Samuel while Nate sang softly in Apache, as their unborn child quickened with life, as the world outside slowly, painfully, inevitably changed, their love story continued. Not the ending, but the beginning of everything that mattered. A warrior and a widow who'd found in each other the courage to live, to love, to create something beautiful from the ashes of all they'd lost. By winter, she would have his daughter growing inside her, and the promise would be complete. But the love that had created that promise, that would grow forever, as vast and endless as the desert sky, as powerful and enduring as the mountains that had witnessed their unlikely union. They had won the only victory that mattered. They had chosen each other, and in choosing, had chosen life. If you've made it this far, you've witnessed something extraordinary, a love that conquered impossible odds. Don't let stories like this disappear. Click the like button and subscribe to the channel so tomorrow, when you're scrolling through endless content, you'll find another story that reminds you why love is the most powerful force in any frontier. Until then, remember, sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply choosing to love in a world that tells you not to.